comment, share, and like for more videos to my channel. Hit the bell if you mess with hell.
Contracts in the independent rap game right now. And the man holding the keys to that cage just made it crystal clear. No amount of money NBA Youngboy is throwing on the table is going to open that door. Not today. Not like this. Behind the loyalty and the brotherhood you see plastered all over social media between Youngboy and Finesse, there is a business war happening behind closed doors that most of y'all haven't been fully briefed on. J. Prince didn't build Rap-A-Lot Records into a legacy institution by letting artists walk in and out whenever somebody with deep pockets came knocking. And that's exactly what makes this situation so much more layered than what's showing up on your timeline. The real story behind why Finesse 2x cannot simply pack his bags and roll with Youngboy, what that contract actually locks him into, and what J. Prince's response really signals about the power dynamics in this industry. We are about to break all of that down with no filter. Yo, what's good, fam? Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, we get into the real industry politics, the street dynamics, and the behind-the-scenes moves that mainstream media won't sit down and actually explain to you. And today we are diving deep into one of the most fascinating chess matches happening in hip-hop right now. J. Prince, Finesse 2x, and NBA Youngboy all tangled up in a situation that is equal parts business, loyalty, and culture. Make sure you stay locked in until the end, because the details on what it would actually take to free Finesse from this deal will genuinely surprise you. Let's get into it. Now, before we get into this wild ride, let me keep it 100 with y'all. There's been a lot of noise circulating on social media about this situation. People speculating, people taking sides, people acting like they know the full picture when they're really only seeing about 10% of what's actually going on. We about to separate the facts from the fiction, the real from the fake, and give you a complete understanding of how we even got here. To understand this situation properly, you have to understand who all three of these men are. Not just as artists or public figures, but as people operating inside a very specific world with very specific codes. J. Prince is not just a music executive. He is one of the most respected and in certain circles feared figures in the entire history of hip-hop. This is a man who built Rap-A-Lot Records from the ground up in Houston, Texas, at a time when nobody was looking at Houston as a music market. He signed and developed legends. He navigated industry politics that would have crushed ordinary men. And he did all of it while maintaining a street credibility and a personal code that even his rivals have publicly acknowledged. Finesse 2x is a Memphis rapper who has been building serious momentum. He's raw, he's authentic, and the streets have been rocking with him hard. His music carries that Memphis DNA that connects deeply with a certain demographic. And when NBA Youngboy started showing him love, people understood immediately why the chemistry made sense. Youngboy has always gravitated toward artists who feel real, who feel unpolished in the right way, who carry that energy from the bottom up. But here's where it gets real spicy, because Finesse 2x didn't arrive at this moment of buzz without some strings attached. Those strings are wrapped up in a deal with J. Prince that is far more complicated than most people realize. So, check it. Let's talk about what Finesse 2x is actually locked into, because this is the foundation of everything else that's happening in this story. Finesse 2x is signed to a 360 deal. Now, for y'all who might not be immediately familiar with what a 360 deal means in practice, let me break it down. A standard record deal historically meant a label signed an artist, helped them make and distribute music, and took a percentage of record sales. That was the basic exchange. But a 360 deal is a completely different animal. A 360 deal means the label or the management company has a stake in virtually everything the artist generates revenue from. We're talking recorded music, yes, but also touring, merchandise, endorsement deals, acting opportunities, brand partnerships, publishing, all of it. The label essentially positions itself as a financial participant in every single income stream that flows to the artist. Now, in the right situation, with the right team behind you, a 360 deal can actually work in an artist's favor because it theoretically incentivizes the label to invest more aggressively across all areas of your career, rather than just pushing records. But in a situation where an artist wants to leave, where the relationship has broken down, or where another opportunity is pulling them in a different direction, a 360 deal becomes a prison. And that word is not an exaggeration. It is the correct description. The contract that Finesse 2x is in isn't just a 360 deal in the broad sense. According to what has come to light around this situation, the terms are structured in a way that gives J. Prince and his organization significant control over not just where Finesse makes money, but where he can make music, who he can formally collaborate with on a commercial level, and how any new deal would have to be structured if he were to transition to a different home. That means that even if Youngboy came in with a number that could buy Finesse out, it is not simply a transaction where you write a check and walk away. There are provisions in that deal that will need to be negotiated. Clauses that protect the original party's financial interests long after any buyout takes place, and potentially non-compete elements that would complicate any immediate pivot to a new label structure. The real kicker though, J. Prince is not a man who negotiates from a position of desperation. When you have built the kind of legacy and the kind of financial infrastructure that he has built, you do not need to say yes to any offer that comes to you. You have the luxury of being patient, and patience in a contract dispute is power. Let me break it down for y'all even further. When you sign with somebody of J. Prince's stature, you are not just signing with a label. You are signing with a name, a reputation. J. Prince is absolutely aware of the value he brings to any artist under his umbrella, which is exactly why he does not feel any urgency to negotiate Finesse 2x out of an agreement that he views as fair, and as something Finesse entered into willingly. But here's where it gets real interesting. Because to fully understand why Youngboy is in a position of trying to buy Finesse out of this contract in the first place, you have to go back and understand the road these two traveled to get to where they are now. And that road has some serious potholes. Youngboy and Finesse 2x were not always in this brotherhood energy you see them displaying publicly. Real talk, these two had genuine friction between them. The beef between NBA Youngboy and Finesse 2x surfaced publicly, and it was the kind of energy that in the rap world, given the backgrounds and the affiliations involved, could have escalated into something a lot more serious than words and subliminal tracks. The tension had roots in the layered and complicated dynamics of street politics mixed with rap politics, which if you understand either world even a little bit, you know is one of the most volatile combinations that exists. When you've got two artists who both carry credibility from the streets, who both have people around them who operate with a certain code, and who both have pride that doesn't bend easily, conflict doesn't stay small. It has a gravity to it that pulls everything into it. The specifics of what sparked the initial friction between YB and Finesse got discussed in interviews and in social media posts from people in both camps at the time. There were shots taken. Not necessarily the kind you read about in legal documents, but the kind that come through in energy, in the way certain conversations get cut short, in the way certain streets align and realign. In the Memphis to Louisiana pipeline of rap politics, Finesse and Youngboy's tension was real enough that people who move in those circles took it seriously. Now, this is where we got to address something that a lot of people skip over when they talk about beefs that end. The ending of a rap beef, especially when it involves men with real street credibility and real street ties, is not simply a handshake and a photo op. The ending of a real beef is a statement. It says something about both parties involved. It says that both men were secure enough in their own position to prioritize something bigger than the friction that existed between them. And that's exactly what happened here. Youngboy and Finesse 2x squashed whatever was between them. They came back together, and when they did, it wasn't performative. You could see in how they moved and how they showed up for each other publicly that this was a genuine reconnection. Youngboy gravitating toward Finesse and wanting him in his corner wasn't a business calculation. Or at least, it wasn't only a business calculation. There was a real appreciation there, a real recognition of what Finesse represents as both an artist and a person. And that is precisely what makes the contract situation so frustrating for Youngboy. Because here he has a man he's now rocking with, a man he wants to invest in and build with. And there's this existing structure that is standing in the way of what could be a very powerful professional partnership. That frustration is what drove Youngboy to reportedly make moves toward buying Finesse out of his deal. He wasn't approaching this as a random business acquisition. He was approaching it as taking care of somebody who is now in his circle. In the culture, that matters enormously. That is the kind of move that builds and reinforces loyalty in ways that nothing else can replicate. Now, let's talk about something that adds another entire layer of complexity to this whole situation. The history between NBA Youngboy and J. Prince themselves. Because these two are not starting this negotiation from a neutral place. There is history there. And in the world these men operate in, history shapes everything. Jay Prince and NBA Youngboy have had their own tensions that played out in the public sphere. Jay Prince, being who he is in the industry and in the culture, has been a figure who has been involved in or adjacent to situations involving Youngboy at different points. The relationship between an OG of Jay Prince's caliber and a young artist of Youngboy's generation is never simple. There's respect that has to be established and maintained. There are lines that can't be crossed. And there are moments where the business interests of powerful men don't align, which creates the kind of friction that doesn't resolve easily because both parties have too much pride and too much standing to simply fold. The street's been talking about the dynamic between Jay Prince and Youngboy for a while now. Jay Prince has made public statements at various points that made it clear he is not intimidated by Youngboy's reach or his fan base or the resources around him. That is just not how Jay Prince operates. He's been in rooms with people whose power and whose danger far exceeded what the music industry typically produces, and he has navigated every single one of those rooms without compromising his position. For Jay Prince, the approach Youngboy has taken to try to buy Finesse out of his contract is something that touches on more than just dollars and cents. In the world Jay Prince comes from and has operated in for decades, the way you approach a negotiation says as much as the offer itself. If you come to a man of Jay Prince's stature and essentially signal that you want to pull someone out of his camp, you better come correct. You better come with respect. You better acknowledge the relationship that already exists and the investment that has already been made. And this is where the public response from Jay Prince gets interesting. Because Jay Prince coming out and responding to the situation publicly, rather than simply handling it quietly behind closed doors, is itself a message. It's a statement to the industry that he is not going to pretend this isn't happening. And he is not going to allow anyone to create a narrative around this situation that doesn't accurately reflect the terms of the agreement or the respect due to the people who made investments in Finesse 2x before the momentum started building. In the hood, we know that when a man of Jay Prince's stature speaks publicly about a business matter, it is not because he is feeling threatened. It is because he is establishing a record. He is putting something on the table that cannot be misrepresented later. He is essentially saying, we all see what's happening here, we all know what was agreed to, and the terms of that agreement are at play here beyond just this one situation. Because this isn't only about Finesse 2x and NBA Youngboy. This is about a principle that Jay Prince has built his entire career and reputation on. The sanctity of agreements and the respect that is owed to people who take chances on artists before the world catches on. Let me break it down for y'all in a way that cuts through the surface level reading of this situation. When Finesse 2x got his deal, he was not at the level of buzz and momentum he's at now. The deal was struck at a time when Jay Prince was making a bet on potential. That's how the music business has always worked at its core. Somebody sees something in an artist before the rest of the world does. They invest resources, relationships, and energy into developing that artist. And the deal reflects the risk that was taken. The expectation is that when the bet pays off, the agreement is honored. Now, NBA Youngboy comes in after the momentum is built, after the investment has begun to bear fruit, and essentially attempts to redirect that fruit somewhere else. From Jay Prince's perspective, that is not just a business dispute. That is a challenge to the entire model of how he operates. And Jay Prince responding to that publicly is him drawing the line not just for Youngboy, but for anyone in the industry watching this play out. The message is clear. I am not a man whose investments can be outbid away once they start paying off. For y'all who might not understand the cultural weight of what Jay Prince represents in this space, let me give you some context. Rap-A-Lot Records and the infrastructure Jay Prince built around it has been a force in hip-hop for decades. He has been involved in situations that tested his resolve in ways that go far beyond music business negotiations. He has stood firm in moments that would have broken lesser men. His reputation is built on an absolute consistency between what he says and what he does. When Jay Prince says something publicly about how he operates, there is an unbroken track record behind that statement that gives it weight most people in the music industry simply cannot match. That reputation is also why Finesse 2x situation is so complicated. It's not just that the contract terms are difficult, it's that the man holding that contract has both the legal standing and the cultural standing to enforce it on terms that are not going to bend simply because someone with a large platform and a passionate fan base wants a different outcome. Now, this is where we got to address the real question that everybody wants answered. What would it actually take to get Finesse 2x out of this contract? Because people keep throwing around the idea that Youngboy has enough money to make this happen, and while financial resources matter, this situation is more nuanced than a pure financial transaction. First, let's talk about the numbers dimension, because it is real even if it's not the whole story. A 360-deal buyout is not simply paying back in advance. When you are buying someone out of a 360 deal, you have to account for the projected future earnings across all the revenue streams that the label had a stake in. You're talking about potential touring revenue over the remaining contract period. You're talking about merchandise projections. You're talking about the publishing stake. You're talking about the value of any brand deals that might have been pursued under the current structure. All of those projected future revenues have to be calculated, negotiated, and settled. And the party holding the contract has every right to set that number based on their own projections of what Finesse's trajectory could produce. Given that Finesse is rising, those projections are not going to be conservative. Real talk. When you're dealing with a 360 deal for an artist whose momentum is visibly accelerating, the buyout number can quickly reach a figure that even well-resourced independent artists would struggle to absorb without it impacting their own financial structure. Youngboy is wealthy, but the question of whether the buyout price Jay Prince would actually agree to is one that makes financial sense for Youngboy's operation is a real question. Second, and this is crucial, money alone does not resolve this situation. Because this is not just a business transaction between two parties who have no relationship and no history.
A situation that gets resolved quietly, jewelry returned, respect shown, both sides move on. You've got a public fracture. Youngboy never publicly thanked Jay Prince, never made that call publicly, and that silence in this world speaks volumes. Now let's fast forward because this is where the situation goes from industry politics and bruised egos to actual violence. And this is the part that most people covering this story have been getting wrong or leaving out entirely. Ben 10. If you're not familiar with the name, Ben 10 is one of Youngboy's people, part of his inner circle associated with the Never Broke Again movement, somebody who moves with Youngboy or in connection to his world, and Ben 10 got shot. But here's what really happened, and this is the part that needs to be broken down properly because the connection to Jay Prince's family changes everything about how we understand this beef. Jay Prince has a son, and his son was involved in a situation that created the chain of events that led to Ben 10 taking those shots. Here's what went down. Jay Prince's son was the one who sent Youngboy's brother. We're talking about somebody in Youngboy's bloodline to go fight. A fight was organized or instigated, and the setup involved Youngboy's brother being sent into a confrontation that Jay Prince's son had a hand in arranging. The fight happens, and what comes after the fight is that Ben 10 gets shot. Now connect those dots. Jay Prince's son is setting up fights involving people in Youngboy's camp and family, and people connected to Youngboy are ending up shot as a consequence. This is not a coincidence that the streets are willing to overlook. This is seen as direct aggression. This is Jay Prince's bloodline moving against Youngboy's bloodline and someone getting shot in the process. That's not beef anymore. That's war language. Think about what this means from Youngboy's perspective. You're already tight with Jay Prince because you felt disrespected over the 2020 robbery situation. You already feel like he was using your misfortune to position himself. And now his son is out here setting up situations that result in your people getting shot. That's confirmation for Youngboy of everything he already believed about where Jay Prince stood. And here's the thing about Youngboy that people don't fully appreciate. He takes loyalty and disloyalty with extreme seriousness. This man has songs, multiple songs, about betrayal, about people moving wrong, about consequences for those who violate. It's not just rap performance, it's documentation of how he actually moves in the world. So Ben 10 getting shot in the context of Jay Prince's son being involved in the setup? In Youngboy's world, that requires a response. The question is what form that response takes. Now let's be clear about what we know and what we don't. The official narratives around Ben 10's shooting are not fully public in terms of charges, convictions, or confirmed attributions. But the streets have been talking, the connections have been drawn, and the timing and the circumstances point directly to the escalating tension between these two camps. This ain't random. Nobody in either camp is pretending it's random. Now here's where people started connecting the dots and realizing that the Jay Prince versus Youngboy situation is operating on multiple levels simultaneously. This isn't just about a chain, a public post, and a fight that went wrong. There are layers to this that go back to fundamental questions about power, territory, and who controls what in the rap game. Let's talk about territory first. Jay Prince built his influence in Houston over 4 decades. He is the architect of the city's position in hip-hop. When you talk about Houston rap, the culture, the sound, the business infrastructure, Jay Prince's fingerprints are everywhere. That city is, in a very real sense, his domain in the way that few cities can claim to belong to any single figure in rap history. Youngboy, being from Baton Rouge, is not bowing to anybody's territorial claims. That's not how he operates. He's the type of artist who moves where he wants to move, builds what he builds, and doesn't ask permission. But in doing that, in coming through Houston and then publicly, through his silence and later through his associates' words signaling that he doesn't respect Jay Prince's position, he's essentially challenged that territorial authority. And Jay Prince is not the type to let that slide without response either. So you have two personalities who are both essentially immovable objects meeting each other. Neither one is built for backing down. But here's the real tea about why this particular beef is concerning people on a much deeper level than your average rap drama. Jay Prince's connections go into places that most people don't want to publicly acknowledge. His relationship with law enforcement, with legal structures, with people of influence in Texas and beyond, that's a different kind of power than what most rap beef involves. Most beef is between artists or between street organizations. This is beef between an artist and someone who moves in corridors of power that are partially invisible. And on Youngboy's side, the Never Broke Again movement is not just a music label. It's a network of people who are intensely loyal to Youngboy personally. People who have demonstrated that loyalty in ways that go beyond streaming his music. He has built genuine, real-world allegiance that makes any move against him or his people a move against a much larger body. So when you put those two power structures in conflict, Jay Prince's institutional, connected power versus Youngboy's grassroots, street-level loyalty, you've got a collision that isn't going to resolve itself easily.
Comment, share, and like for more videos to my channel. Hit the bell if you mess with hell.